So the third and final framework that we're going to look at is one put forward by John Rawls. Rather than maximising utility or working out whether someone is entitled to whatever they have is that they own, Rawls approached the problem based upon the idea of a social contract. And he asks a fundamental question. What principles of justice would people freely enter to choose if they could do so? And he proposed a thought experiment to work that out. You see, one of the key problems that we have is that we're so soaked in our own circumstances, we can't often think about how others may see the world. And so therefore, any contract that we might want to enter would be one that would favour us in our current position. So instead, he came up with this idea of the veil of ignorance. And what does that actually mean? Well, he said, imagine a situation where you don't know where you're going to end up in the world. You could end up very beautiful or very ugly, very smart or very dumb, very healthy or very unhealthy, etc. So you don't know where you're going to end up. And if you don't know where you're going to end up, what rules about distribution would you actually agree with? So everyone's free to negotiate however they want, and you've got to negotiate in your interests, but you don't know where you're going to end up in society. You could end up at the top, or you could end up at the bottom. What are the rules of distribution you would agree to? Rawls suggests that we would end up taking a conservative position, and we would agree to a position that benefits the least in our society the most. It maximises the minimum position. Now, there are a couple of conditions to this, so why don't we have a look? So it's not simply the maximum position. There are a couple of rules. Everyone should have as much liberty or freedom as possible under the same system, and we should all have the same amount of liberty, okay? So we all have the same amount of freedom. Then, would you allow inequalities? Rawls says yes, provided two conditions are met. Number one, equality of opportunity. As long as everyone is open to be able to earning more than others, you're not precluded any position in society, for instance, based upon where you're born, how you're born, what gender you are, etc. All of the opportunities are actually open to you. The second is we would allow inequality in so much as it gives the greatest benefit to the least in society. So let's have a look at this maximum position in this table here. Just say we have three options before us and that there are four people or four groups of people and that we had a utility score for each of those four groups under option 1, 2 and 3. So, for instance, Group A has 60 utility points under option 1. Group B has 55 and so on. Under option 2, Group A gets 130, etc. Now, what you can see here is that option 1 has the most equal distribution of benefits. They're all quite close. So if you were worried about the spread of distribution or inequality, this is what you'd choose. We can also see that option 3 would be something that a utilitarian would actually choose. If you add these up, option 3 provides 385 units of utility, option 2, 360 units of utility, and option 1, 210 units of utility. So very clearly a utilitarianist would choose option 3. But Rawls suggests neither option 1 nor option 3 is the best. His position would be that provided each person has as much liberty as possible and provided all the positions are open to everyone, there's equality of opportunity, then we should choose option 2. Why? Because the least worst off group, so the lowest score here is 60. The lowest score in option 1 is 45. The lowest score in option 3 is 55. So Rawls is saying option 2 is fundamentally the best position because it makes the least worst off person better off than any other option. So what Rawls is pointing to is that we need to worry about the absolute wealth of the worst off, not their relative wealth, which would be better accommodated under option 1. And even more so, he's suggesting that that rational people behind the veil of ignorance will choose that one because they don't know if they're going to end up as one of the worst off people. And knowing that they might, they're going to choose the option that makes the downside as positive as they possibly can. And that is the maximum position. Of course, just like all ethical theories, there are critiques of Rawls. One is that the original position is too unrealistic. We can't divorce ourselves from the decision that we'd make. And in fact, the idea that we would choose the maximum is an artifact of who we are and what's influenced us to date. The second key criticism is that not everyone might choose the position that makes the worst off better off. Some people may be risk takers. Some people may actually want a society where the overall benefit to society is what matters. So it's not 100% clear that everyone would agree to the logic of Rawls in this social contracting theory. And then, of course, the complicating factor is that systems are dynamic, not static. Rawls gives a position that we distribute everything out. But then what happens in the next round and the next round and the next round? So as Nozick's sports star example shows, even if you separate out all the resources equally among everyone, it won't take long for those resources to start to distribute unevenly between people, particularly if we allow them to freely engage in exchanges. In terms of applying Rawls within business, there are some specific challenges that it faces. Why don't we have a look at them? The first key problem from a business perspective is the interplay between the process that Rawls is using, the veil of ignorance, as a fair procedure in bargaining, with the outcome, a distributive redistribution via the difference principle. So we have this tension between procedural justice and the outcome-focused justice of the distribution that occurs. The second, just like utilitarianism, is that any sense of determining value or who is worst off requires complex judgments about what is valuable, what people like. How do you value things like economic disadvantage, social opportunity, political voice, etc.? Many people disagree on the value in some of these things, let alone how they're distributed across different groups. And finally, very importantly for business policy, if we have a system that starts distributing based upon statistical differences between groups, then it undermines the very idea of individual liberty and individual dignity and autonomy. Merit-based systems that are aimed at selecting individuals but are driven by group-based differences can become very problematic very quickly. So just as with those individual theories of ethics, when we look at different distributions, different ethical approaches to distributing benefits and burdens across society or even across an organisation, we find that there's no singular solution that gives us a one best answer. In fact, they all have different advantages and disadvantages, just like individual level theories from the individual ethical perspective. And I'll leave you to look at this particular table, which tries to take some of these ideas and give you a sense of what an organisation that applied them would actually look like. So that was pretty heavy stuff. But I think it's very important that we understand there is no universally agreed way of justly distributing benefits and burdens across a group, across an organisation, or indeed across an organisation and those who it affects, its stakeholders. Having got that idea in place, that there are these different ways of thinking about just distribution, we can now turn to some specific theories used in business. These frameworks are used to justify a different conceptualization of the purpose of business, about what a business should be trying to do. They are aligned with, but not the same as, an ethical approach to just distribution. They are specific theories that have arisen in business to explain why the key decision makers should be making decisions a certain way. In our next video.